Thank you. Thank you for that. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third presentation in the webinar series focused on the Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award. I am Carrie Mathis, and I proudly serve as the AEP officer for the National Procurement Institute. Before we begin the presentation today, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items to review. This session is being recorded. It will be available on the website, on the NPI website on demand for anybody who may not be able to attend the entire presentation, or maybe if you have some colleagues that can benefit from watching it in the future, it will be available on demand for free access as well. I'd like to ask all of our attendees to please ensure that your connection is maintained on mute for the duration of the presentation. As I mentioned, this is the third webinar in our educational series, and I just want to give you a quick reminder that our fourth and final webinar in the series is scheduled for May 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That session is going to consist of a final wrap-up and question session, so I want to encourage you to register timely if you haven't already done so to participate in that webinar as well. At the conclusion of our guest presenter session, there'll be an opportunity for questions today. So I'm going to ask you guys, if you don't mind holding your questions until that time, or maybe pre-populating those in the chat feature to pose your questions. We are going to aspire to get to as many as possible before the session ends. So again, you're welcome to put those into chat so we can kind of be gathering those, or if you want to hold them till the end, we will have a dedicated period of time to try to get to as many questions as possible before the session concludes. We are so grateful that Axia Cooperative is sponsoring the AEP webinar series this year. And as one of our supporter organizations, Axia continues to support the AEP award program, with this being their second straight year sponsoring the webinar series. So grateful to Axia Cooperative for continuing to support this most important webinar series for the AEP applicants. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Heckman from Axia Cooperative to share some details about Axia to kick off the session. Ken?
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it. And once again, I just want to say how proud we are to support the AEP award, NPI and the AEP award, and specifically the public procurement profession. We are a nationwide cooperative. We're fairly new, but we're rapidly growing. And what sets us apart is that all of our contracts are awarded by lead agencies that have won the AEP award. So it's one of our criteria as we vet potential lead agencies, and we're proud to say that all of our lead agencies have won the award. What we strive to do is provide value to you, best value agreements that are compliant, and we introduce leverage and competitive tension in the process to make sure that the resulting awards are best in breed and provide value to you. We're not interested in awarding to everyone or lead agencies that award to multiple providers. We're interested in getting to best value. We ask that if any of you are interested in a discussion about being a lead agency and you have won the award, we are open to that. And I would ask that you contact me directly so that we can vet that out. I'll certainly be available for those discussions. We also invite you to register, and I'll put the registration link in the chat here in just a little bit, but you can go to our website, axiacoop.org. It's free and it gives you access to our portfolio of contracts, and also it'll keep you informed about as we have new awardees from your fellow public procurement professionals. So with that, I want to thank you once again. I want to wish you the best in applying for this year's award. And hopefully we'll see you at the conference later this year, but I'll be on the last webinar next week again. But I'll turn it back over to you, Carrie, and just say thank you and good luck and keep us in mind.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our session presenter today, Ms. Chris Spriano. She is the Vice President of Programs and Development for the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. Chris leads the program strategy, development, and deployment efforts for the SPLC, ensuring an effective and impact-focused approach in support of advancing and scaling sustainable procurement efforts across all types of procurement organizations. Prior to SPLC, Chris was a supply chain sustainability manager at Cisco Systems, focused on supply chain greenhouse gas emissions, environmental compliance, learning and development, and new product program management. Chris is a certified ISSP Sustainability Excellence Associate and holds a bachelor's in industrial engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are so excited to have Chris here today for the session. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. And folks, I hope you'll please join me in welcoming Chris to our session today. Chris?
Thanks so much, Carrie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. And, I have to just say that I always enjoy reconnecting with NPI and this entire crowd. Been to your conferences a couple times, and there's so much enjoyment, I think, in getting procurement folks like myself included together and really, tackling all kinds of challenges. Today, we are going to talk about Criteria 15. That is all around my world, my current world of sustainable procurement. And, I do also want to thank NPI, Carrie, and everyone for partnering with us on this particular criteria over the last several years. It's been just incredible to be able to scale some of the best practices around this important work. So let's just start with a very quick introduction to the SPLC for those of you that aren't familiar with us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that really brings together a global community of institutional purchasers, suppliers, other NGOs like NPI and other sustainability NGOs, and experts really dedicated to building a more sustainable world through the power of procurement. We have over 180 organizational members today, and that spans across the government sector from all levels, from the county of Multnomah County to, all the way up until recently, the GSA. But you all know about that. And everything in between. The state of California, for example, helped to found us back in 2013. But we don't just focus on supporting government. We also focus on supporting higher education, public and private universities like ASU and MIT, and of course, corporations, all looking to really integrate sustainability into their procurement practices. And through their membership, we work together to develop prioritized guidance, tools, resources to really allow our collective buying power, which is huge when you think about it, in order to really align that collective buying power towards more sustainable goods and services. We provide a number of different resources, as I mentioned, and through these partnerships that we have with NPI and others, we're able to really offer some of those resources to all of you in order to advance our mission. So today we're going to be talking about, really what does this look like from an NPI AEP award standpoint? In order to really set the stage for Criteria 15, I want to just describe what sustainable procurement even means, just to start, and really, work that into more definition, more understanding around what a strategic sustainable procurement program is and why it's important. And that all focuses around Criteria 15A. I'll give you some examples of what a strategic program looks like in practice, and then we'll go into Criteria 15B a little bit more, providing some additional context on the best practices that are found inside of the checklist that's in the application. And then, as Carrie had mentioned, we'll use a good portion of the time at the end just to take your specific questions. Okay. So let's start with the very basics. And I realize that some of this is going to be, a little bit too basic, but just so that we all have a common understanding of some of the definitions that we're dealing with in this criteria. When we talk about sustainable procurement, we're really talking about going further than, traditional or conventional procurement, where we're bringing, value for our money into our organization and we're strengthening the organization. Sustainable procurement really goes into impacts and opportunities that extend beyond just your organization. How does your buying really strengthen the environment around you, society, and the economy? And, there are many different existing names for sustainable procurement. You can see some of those listed here. From our perspective, it's all the same, sustainable procurement, and that's really how you'll hear us refer to it as. So really, what does strengthening the environment, society, and economies mean? Depending on your organization's focus, that might mean purchasing in ways that might reduce waste, purchasing in ways that might address fair labor in your supply chain, purchasing in ways that really drive fair competition and promote small businesses. And what does that mean actually in practice? What does sustainable procurement actually look like once it's fully implemented? This definition is what we use to kind of bring us back down to that practical lens. So basically, sustainable procurement means that your organization is purchasing the most sustainable goods and services from the most sustainable suppliers in alignment with your organization's sustainability goals and initiatives. And again, all in the interest to really achieve that truly sustainable world. But why is this important? It turns out that most of an organization's environmental and social impacts are actually found in its spend. Greenhouse gas emissions, for example, there's all kinds of data at this point from years worth of tracking supplier greenhouse gas emissions, where scope 3, that's supply chain or purchase goods and services, is often driving more than 80% of an organization's greenhouse gas emissions footprint. So that's incredible, right? Basically, if you're an organization that cares about all this stuff and you're not addressing it in supply chain and what you buy, then you're really not dealing with the lion's share of the issues and opportunities. And we're all aware and keenly in tune to the cost-heavy focus that we have in our procurement professions. The incredible part about addressing sustainability impacts in our supply chains is that in addition to improving the environment, society, and economies, sustainable procurement also brings along organizational related benefits that are typically already prioritized. For example, Energy Star certified PC purchases reduce energy usage and related costs. On the intangible side, developing closer relationships and transparency with your suppliers through practicing sustainability-related work can actually reduce your supply chain risk and increase its resiliency over time. So it's really helpful to remember to include these additional benefits in any budget-related requests and/or any ongoing reporting of your progress to really help to demonstrate, to your executives and the organization at large that there's a business case here to really care about the environment, care about society and local economies when you bring this to the table. So now that we know what sustainable procurement is, let's define what we mean by a sustainable procurement program and bring this back into criteria 15. When we talk about a strategic sustainable procurement program, again, laser set on 15A, We're talking about a set of formal strategies, policies, and or projects or activities that are really embedded and integrated into an organization's purchasing processes and meant to improve the environment, society, and economies through our spend, while at the same time delivering on some of those traditional benefits that I mentioned. Now, a strategic program is really able to give additional legs, if you will, to important initiatives that might already be going on independently, such as an EPP policy, or maybe you have a supplier sustainability code of conduct, while at the same time really bringing all those legs together more strategically to do more in a prioritized and scaled manner. Characteristics of a strategic sustainable procurement program include a holistic approach. You're looking at all of your spend, prioritizing the impacts of that spend, developing prioritized strategies really to address those impacts, engaging your executives. Maybe that means engaging your senior director of procurement, if that's, the person fully responsible for your spend. Maybe that's engaging your chief procurement officer. That could be engaging your governor if you're a state. So some of that, depends on what type of organization you are, but, very, very important to ensure that whatever program you're building is really fully endorsed by the appropriate executives in your organization. Assigned resources and training. Do you have a sustainable procurement lead identified to really carry the work forward? And of course, like any strategic program, are you measuring and reporting results? So a strategic program really follows the same rationale as any other strategic program in a procurement organization. Say something like a IT category management program. Now, ultimately, that rationale establishes and follows that a strategic planning process scales specific sustainable procurement activities and maximizes results. So how do you demonstrate your organization's sustainable procurement program for criteria 15A? There are truly multiple ways that you can do so, again, depending on the type of organization you are and what formalizes a strategy within your organization. For many of you here in the public sector, you might opt towards developing and formalizing a sustainable procurement policy, and that would certainly demonstrate a strategic program has been implemented in your organization. And here are two examples that are both publicly available if you want to take a look. SPLC member City of Portland and also the University of California system both have developed and publicly published their own sustainable procurement policy and guidelines. And here are two more ways that you can demonstrate a strategic sustainable procurement program. Again, this is 15A in the criteria. The first is an organizational level sustainability plan. You can see Harvard's here, again, publicly available if you wanted to take a look at that. And these sustainability plans really talk more holistically about what the organization is doing, the strategies that they're addressing and pursuing to really incorporate sustainability into their organization at large. Oftentimes, these plans also double click down into what specifically procurement is doing in order to really help that organization achieve its sustainability goals. So a sustainability plan is also another great way to demonstrate a strategic program, as is a more internal guideline for operations. We've seen this particularly in corporations, and I know that's not this crowd, but just so that you're aware, in a decentralized procurement model, we often see organizations opt towards developing operational guidelines on, purchasing more sustainable goods and services that's then, disseminated across different business units, different departments that are really doing their own purchasing. So in addition to leveraging the publicly available examples that I shared for, developing your own strategic program, we have a couple other resources available with websites here in case you want to call them up. The SPLC does have a sustainable procurement policy template that you can use just to get started on your own policy, although I would highly recommend taking a look at those others that I mentioned as well. We've also got this resource that we leverage quite regularly in our sustainable procurement coaching workshops that really provides some of the key components of a strategic sustainable procurement program. And, this I'm sure will resonate, again, very similar to any other strategic program, having a 3 to 5 year vision, having a set of prioritized impacts, prioritize strategies, goals and metrics and projects. This really, I think, in a nice one-page view, kind of shares a strategic sustainable procurement program, or can visually share a strategic program for really any type of organization. So this particular example that I'm sharing right now is from a beginning strategic program. And I do want to emphasize that there's a maturity level here at play. You don't be intimidated when you read the City of Portland's policy. They have been working on this for, I think, almost 20 years, longer than SPLC has been around. But it's, it's a great benchmark, a great vision to strive towards. As if you are just starting, you want to recognize a realistic 3 to 5 year vision, getting started, getting, maybe some specific impacts that you're focused on based off of existing potential policies that you already have in place, and really getting, some fundamental activities going to really start to build momentum around your goals. So for this beginner program, you could see that they're focused on waste, climate, diversity, and local sourcing. And their prioritized strategies, again, are organized to forward addressing those impacts through training and stakeholder engagement. In this case, adopting the EPA's recommended eco-labels and, potentially improving upon an existing local sourcing program that they have with diverse suppliers. So just an example for those, again, that are, really beginning this journey. Now, again, emphasizing that in 15A, you want to formalize it. You want to get that executive approval. So in this example, the beginning program was approved and adopted by the CPO. Here we have the state of Minnesota's sustainable procurement one-pager and program. And this, I won't go into the details here, but you'll have it in the decks. I will just highlight that, similar to the city of Portland, the state of Minnesota has been working on this for some time. Also, helped to found the SPLC. So that gives you an idea of how long they've really been committed to the work. Again, I won't go in detail on all the components, but I do just want to point out that their more advanced program and one-pager really expands in scope in terms of the impacts that they're addressing. They're also a little bit more pointed on their prioritized strategies towards addressing those impacts. So for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions through operational efficiencies, and doing that specifically through PC purchasing and other specific purchases, if you will. On the toxins and harmful chemicals side, doing that very specifically on cleaning substitutions. On the supplier diversity side, they've invested in doing their own and hosting their own supplier development fair to really promote equal competition between some of those small diverse businesses and some of the larger businesses that they work with. So again, just a real example of how, one of our members, and I'm sure folks that you guys work with as well, how they're really leaning into their strategic program, and really how that's demonstrated through that one pager and through their work. So in addition to creating our strategic program one pager template, and really, again, working together with our members and external stakeholder organizations, we have also developed and have shared, through criteria 15, this list of best practices for sustainable procurement. So how do you actually, get there? What are the key components of a strategic program? And, how do I, really prioritize advancing, towards leadership along the way? The checklist that you see here is offered again in criteria 15 as a resource, and also as a mechanism to qualify for the additional 5 points. And it's really centered around these 7 different best practice categories. So the first is setting relevant environmental, social, and economic sustainability priorities. So going through the motions of understanding what your spend is, understanding as best as you can, sometimes benchmarking what the sustainability impacts are of that spend, so you can really focus your sustainable procurement program specifically on those areas. The second category is pretty straightforward, having meaningful goals and metrics in place. Staff engagement and accountability is really all about training and eventually working in sustainable procurement performance metrics in personnel reviews. And supplier engagement, transparency, and accountability, getting that relationship going with your key strategic suppliers, where you're understanding, where are they really adding to the impacts, the sustainability impacts of your purchasing, and working with them to address that over the long term. Good services evaluation and transparency, this really, you'll see, revolves more around very product and category specific decisions. How are you evaluating, what IT and electronics sustainability looks like? Are you purchasing eco labels? Are you integrating RFP language, inside of your bids in order to deliver on more sustainable choices? Supplier development and innovation, mentioned that with the state of Minnesota example, really investing in your suppliers to do what it takes to bring them up to speed on, on serving as a more sustainable supplier. That might mean educating them on sustainability even. It might mean educating small businesses on your procurement system. Again, different organizations have different priorities, but this, as we see, is certainly one of the necessary best practices in achieving that sustainable procurement leadership. And then finally, communications and program transparency. So are you sharing what you're learning along the way with others? And I think, the public sector, this entire crowd, I have to say, does such a great job with that. Oftentimes, presenting publicly their progress on, projects that are related to their sustainable procurement programs. And I think, let's see, I think those are all the points that I wanted to make here. Oh, yes, that's right. I want to just further explain that within the inventory checklist, you will see multiple best practices within an individual category. And I wanted to highlight that these are really meant to reflect a maturity approach. So when you start to go through staff engagement and accountability, for example, the first step, the first best practice is really making staff aware that there are sustainable procurement activities going on, educating them and training them is kind of the next step. And, continuing to engage cross-functional staff and really building them into, programmatic goals. So each of these underneath staff engagement and accountability are really representing that maturity trajectory, right? Where you're starting in this best practice and initiating, developing, improving, and ultimately achieving leadership status within that best practice category. So it's important to keep that in mind as you're looking at this checklist. Ultimately, criteria 15B is looking for achieving at least half of a chosen best practice to be implemented and be able to be demonstrated in order to qualify for those additional points. I think we're gonna go, Carrie, I had the hands-on workshop slated for this section. But I think rather than go into that, I think I'm just going to wrap up with Q&A. So we've talked about the definition of sustainable procurement, what a program looks like. We've talked about examples of how you can demonstrate a strategic program. You're familiar with the checklist. We have, several different best practice categories that you could potentially apply for the extra points for. And I believe, short of the hands-on activity, which I don't think we're going to have time for today, we could open it up to questions.
All right, sounds good, Chris. Thank you for that. That overview was really great. And I really appreciate you taking us through the inventory checklist because there's a lot of detail there. So I think it's really helpful to kind of pause and just, kind of break it down and talk about those best practices by categorization. For me, that's like super helpful. To an agency that's, I would say, somewhat mature in the sustainability, but not completely. Like it's just kind of an ongoing effort that we're going through. So I think to have something like that really helps us as we kind of go through a maturity model to understand where we are and where we aspire to be and what we need to do to get there. So I'm really appreciative of that resource specifically. I think it's a great guide for us. So I will just open it up. I had put something in chat. If you guys want to put your questions in chat, if you have questions, you can do so at this time, or feel free just to come off of mute if you have a question for Chris. This relates to both of those criteria elements within 15, which is 15A and B. So for those of you that are aspiring to pursue either or both of those, this is like a great opportunity to ask the expert, being Chris. Is there something specific that you need to know about when you're pursuing this, or just even in general for your own sustainability programs within your procurement operation or your organization? Feel free to ask at this time. This is a great opportunity to learn from Chris. I'm not seeing anything in chat yet, Chris, but we'll just kind of give it a pause. Because we have quite a few folks on here just to see if they're want to come off mute and ask, or if they're shy and maybe want to put it in chat, we'll give everybody the opportunity, because I don't want to conclude without everybody having a chance to ask your questions.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to answer just general, state of the business questions too. Our work is continually evolving, and this year is no different. So open to any types of questions, obviously prioritizing those related to the award.
I think for us, Chris, we're really watching, right? Like a lot of the legislation, a lot of the actions coming from the federal, but also within, my respective states specifically. I'm sure others are looking at theirs, like, trying to kind of figure out and navigate, how those directives, how those executive orders, how some of those policy decisions made either at the federal or state levels might impact our abilities at the local level, right? To be able to affect and be able to kind of grow these sustainability models that we might already have. So I think it's probably unique to every area of the state, of the country, how they might be impacted in any sort of way. So this is probably something that's near and dear to your heart when you're watching some of these things too, I would imagine, to kind of understand and navigate what those directives and policies are going to do in terms of impacting sustainability programs.
Yeah, no doubt, Carrie, no doubt. And yeah, I think, a couple things that we're consistently hearing, I would say, is quite frankly, a lot of sustainable procurement teams and sustainability teams in general waiting for their attorneys to advise them on what they can and can't do. To your point, Carrie, I think it's so complex because, we have states probably online that have DEI laws on the books, and how do they respond to that, right? We're in, I would say, a wait and see mode as an organization to, and are continuing to listen to our members on, the approaches that they're taking. One thing that was really carried through, I think, in a recent message from our CEO, Mark Heiserkamp, was at the end of the day, sustainable procurement just makes sense. And that often is CENTS. Over the last several years, I'd say we've kind of, gotten away from reminding people of all those extra business benefits that go with these activities. And, one thing is for sure, the SPLC and really all of our members are kind of going back to reminding ourselves that, we have to probably lead with that in the next several years. How does this work really, yes, address environment, so society, and, grow local economies. But also, how does it really help make operations more efficient, reduce costs, improve, again, resiliency in our deliveries to our end users. So that, I would say, is, a consistent direction that everyone's heading towards. But the devil's in the details, right? And certainly we hear from all of our members that, they are literally working with their legal teams on understanding the full impact for their specific organization.
So we got a question in chat here, Chris. I'm gonna throw it to you. I think this question kind of is posed to the other attendees of the session. So for those of you joining, if you want to maybe answer the question in chat, but I'll try to frame it broadly so you can see it. She's asking, has anyone found it hard to create buy-in within your agency for sustainability programs and policies? And what did you do to create that buy-in? So Chris, I think for you, do you have any sort of recommendations or suggestions of things that might be helpful, right, to try to pursue getting that buy-in for sustainability, for the agency being able to kind of stand up in a sustainability program or policy?
Yeah, we definitely, again, I mentioned the business case, but even before that, understanding how this work aligns to existing organizational level goals. So, you may have some environmental goals that are already in place. Toxic chemicals, for example, goals and policies, right? You may already have some, local sourcing initiatives. Being able to really align the idea of a strategic program to, what's already in place is a super important first step and an essential one in really making that business case to your stakeholders to move forward with creating a holistic approach on the work, for sure. I would love to hear from others, though. I'm sure we have some folks that have had to, embark on this part of the journey.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing any other in chat. I put in chat, our sustainability plan was initiated by our mayor, so it kind of started at the top of our organization. It was something that really was important from his perspective to be included in his, agenda as the leader of our organization. And so I think that's a much easier lift, right? When you have that level of support and interest in the initiative that starts on the top and then it kind of flows down to the organization. But if when
Yeah.
you're within an organization that doesn't yet have a plan, doesn't have a policy, I could imagine that's got to be a struggle to an extent of trying to kind of lead that effort and think about, how do you champion that, right? Like if it's not being championed from the top, like how does that get championed? How does it make sense?
Yep.
Not CENTS, right? But like the SE, part of it,
Yes.
right? Like how do you articulate like the benefits of it, when everybody's always so careful to kind of balance cost, right? Especially nowadays, right? Like everybody's kind of really, really in tune with what are the costs of things? How can we kind of justify some of these things, right? But when you look at it from the overarching environmental, good that can come of these kind of things that makes a case for it, right? But then how do you balance like if costs, right? If it's associated with costs, that might be a tough thing to try to articulate in terms of a value.
Sure. And I will also share one last thing before we go to the next question, Carrie and everyone, that we do have a white paper that walks through how to make that business case that goes into a lot more detail on some of the things that Carrie mentioned and that I mentioned. So I'm happy to give you that link after the call, Carrie, so you can distribute it to everyone. It's a public posting, so.
I think that would be really great, Chris. And what we can do is, for those of you that are attending today, we can put that link or that PDF document on the website where we're
Yeah.
going to house the information of this recording from this session. And Chris, if you'd be willing to share your slide deck, we can kind of post
Of
that up there as a
course.
resource too. And then that white paper, that would be a really great resource, I think, for folks to be able to use maybe to try to make that case and build, a
Yeah.
good business case for consideration of implementing a program. That would be great.
Yeah. And then, it's okay to start small. That's really how I got introduced to sustainable procurement at Cisco Systems. There was more of a grassroots project or initiative going on to reduce waste. I got involved, and what a great way to show the business case, right? We were able to show based off of optimizing packaging and deliveries, we reduced a ton of junk, and we ended up saving a lot of money in optimized deliveries. And that really served as kind of a launching pad to do much bigger things. So, especially if you're a little bit of a smaller organization, it's a great way to get started and to really demonstrate the case for doing more.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Because I'm not seeing any in chat. But I just want to make sure that we are affording everybody an opportunity to ask any sort of questions that they might have before we conclude today. Okay, so I'm not seeing any others, Chris. Is there any kind of last comments or thoughts maybe that you want to share with us? Folks
Yeah,
aspiring to pursue this criteria?
absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks again for the time, Carrie and everyone. We are a small but mighty team. And, if you do ever have a question, I mean, I've talked about our organizational memberships. They're great. But if you aren't at that point, don't ever hesitate to reach out to any one of us for just a quick question or guidance. We run a a very hopefully helpful ship. And this is really all about, you know, again, using the power of procurement for good. So yeah, you've got, oh, I should share it. Here's my email. Feel free to reach out with, you know, questions, challenges that you need help with. And yeah, of course, if you want to learn more about membership, we can get you connected on that as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time to enlighten us today with regards to this particular criteria and some of the tools that we need to kind of look to, right, when we're trying to either build or build upon a sustainable program within our organizations. For those of you joining, I want to thank you all for attending today. Thank you so much for being part of the webinar. I want to give one final reminder before we wrap up that the fourth and final webinar in the series is scheduled for May 1st. Next Thursday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, we're going to be focusing on final wrap-up and questions. So please take the time to go ahead and register yourself so that you can take advantage of that webinar opportunity as well. And with that, I want to just once again extend my thanks to Ken Heckman and Axia Cooperative for sponsoring the webinar series. I want to thank Chris from the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council for joining today and really giving us a really great webinar session regarding sustainability. And thank you guys all for attending today. I appreciate you attending. Please look forward to the resources on our website in the coming days. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.